Hello and welcome to Access to Justice. I'm your host, Evan Clark from Kahane Law. My co-host is Heather Malarick of Merrick Law, and we're joined today by our very special guest, Kim McDonald of McDonald Advisory. Kim is a financial advisor and an insurance advisor with Raymond James Limited. Heather, Kim, how are you?
Good. Kind of weathering out a bit of a cold spell. We're filming this in February, and I had decided that winter was over about a week and a half ago. But I suppose winter isn't quite over with us. So, watching the snow fly and dreaming of spring. How about you, Evan?
Well, I'm actually I don't know if you can tell on this, but it is February and I actually got a little bit of sun. I'm tanned. I went to Mexico for 2 weeks. I'm quite annoyed because while I was gone, it was supposed to be really cold here. But it was like, I understand it was like 11 above one at some point. And then I get home and it's minus 20. Like I came home and a snowstorm started. So that's not the way it's supposed to work. A little upset about that.
Oh, I'm sorry about your terrible luck having to go on holidays and come home to that.
Kim, how about you? How are you doing?
We're doing pretty good here today. We weren't sure what we were going to wake up to in the markets now that Russia has sort of poured over into the Ukrainian territory, but markets seem to have priced in a little bit of this turbulence, and they're not doing too badly. So overall, I think we're doing pretty good. My mood is generally dictated by whether we're making money or not. So I think, it could be worse today.
Good. And speaking of my vacation, I got a little plug for Kim. Kim helped my insurance needs for my vacation. Obviously, like right now, we're at the tail end of, hopefully, knock on wood, COVID. And Canada still has these testing requirements. And so there's this big risk. I went on vacation with all my family. There's 7 of us. A big risk that someone's going to test positive for COVID. And then we'd have to somehow stay in Mexico for another 10 days until they could come home. And so Kim bent over backwards, knocked down the doors of all the insurance providers to like really get it straight what they were providing and got me insured. And I'm claiming on that insurance because 2 of my kids tested positive and they're still in Mexico with my wife. So Kim, I just can't thank you enough for all the hard work you did before I left on my vacation for what was probably a very small payout on that commission.
It's not the money that matters. It's that people get the right product and they get what they expect. So yes, I think it sounds like that all worked out properly. And I'm really happy that you put your travel insurance in place because a lot of people don't think about it.
Yeah, it was like, I just can't, when we've got the test results back and there was some positive, I was like, oh man. But then I was also like, well, Kim helped me plan for this. And I was like giving Kim virtual high fives in my mind. Thank you, Kim. So really appreciate that. Also, if you hear some buzzing, it's because like the guys outside my window are blowing snow around. So apologize for that. Now,
That was on cue.
just walked right by my window. So we'll just wait for that to end for a second. All right, they must be done. Okay. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome, I don't think it's a secret, this is my favorite guest that we've ever had on. It's my best friend. Michael Sommerfeld. Michael Sommerfeld, if you don't already know who he is, he's a clinical social worker, therapist. MSW, RCSW, we're going to find out what those mean in a second. He specializes, his favorite area is sex therapy. And Mike is well educated. He was at the U of T, where he did some of that education. And he's been all over the place practicing, being mentored by people very highly regarded in his field. And we met one Sunday. We go to the same church, and Mike moved in to the area about, I think it was a week after we moved in, and people had helped me move. And so they knew that I had guitars. And then they pointed to this guy over there and he said, "Hey, that guy, he also plays guitar. You should go talk to him." I went over there and it was love at first sight. Is that accurate, Mike?
I think that is accurate. There was this kind of immediate attraction, this immediate draw. And we quickly also, I think we also discovered that there were some differences that we had to navigate and figure out. And I think we have a stronger relationship because we had to figure out those differences.
That's right. Mike.
Just that I would try to make it sound couples therapy-ish.
Yeah, but you're right. But we found richness in our differences, that we found that enriches our relationship.
Yeah. Right, there's room for two of us in this relationship.
Yeah. I mean, we have different tastes in guitars, different favorite guitars, but we enjoy each other's guitars, but we don't purchase the same guitars.
Right.
And instead of that being something to have conflict about, we found that we just have a larger guitar collection collectively between us.
Yeah. And just appreciate the difference, right?
Yeah. Okay, but thank you for indulging that. Mike is a good friend of mine, and we enjoy each other's company. But Mike, let's start with, what is MSW and what is RCSW, and what are you all about?
Oh, yeah. So there's a couple straightforward answers in there. So MSW stands for Master of Social Work. So like you said, I went to the University of Toronto, where I studied at the Inwin-Tash Faculty of Social Work, and I got a master's degree there. Prior to that, I was at the University of Lethbridge, bachelor's degree in psychology. So that was kind of my education path. And then in social work, you go through a bit of a process to become a registered social worker. And then the RCSW stands for Registered Clinical Social Worker. And what that is just further designation that says that I was supervised for X amount of time, focusing on clinical social work, which is basically psychotherapy. Yeah. So Master of Social Work, Registered Clinical Social Worker.
Okay.
Yeah. What am I all about? Was that the next?
Yeah.
Oh, see, that's a big question. I think what I'm all about. So this is kind of like my career philosophy, I guess, or maybe even life philosophy or philosophy about human beings. I think what I'm all about, and if you come to my office for therapy, you'll discover that I try to take a very like humanistic approach to therapy. And so I assume that I'm working with good people who want good things for themselves and for their loved ones, who are trying to find acceptance and belonging and love, and who are not trying to sabotage that. They actually want it. They're trying to create richness and goodness in their life. And sometimes we just get stuck. And what I do is I try to help people understand where their struggles might be and help them move forward out of those places. So that's what I'm all about.
Nice. So I suppose then that implies that another option is to start from a place of that your people you're working with are not good people, but you choose to make the assumption they are good people.
Yeah, I guess a therapist could be like, these are awful people coming to my office, and if they would just snap out of things, then. But I just haven't found that works very well. And I think to take a compassionate, empathetic approach with couples or individuals or anyone, any human being, I think that it lands a little easier, and I think it's more productive. There's this great quote by this psychologist named Carl Rogers. He's a humanistic psychologist, and he says it's an interesting paradox that it's only when I accept myself for exactly as I am that I have any power to make any change. And I think that quote really kind of embodies what I'm trying to bring to my work, right? Is taking people how they are, finding the goodness and the acceptability and the belonging in where they are, and helping them grow and develop from there.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you're kind of a unique guest in that, we're called Access to Justice, and you're not the first psychologist we've had on, but we've had them on talking in the context of divorce or things of this nature.
So I'm not a psychologist. I just don't.
Right, you're a social worker.
I don't want it to get out there that I was claiming to be a psychologist.
No, because you're in big trouble. That college comes after you, you're done.
Yeah, Cap would. They would.
Yeah. No, you took a different route, the social worker route, to become a therapist, which maybe people don't know that route is out there, to become a clinical therapist through social work instead of a psychologist, but it is.
And there's a few differences, I suppose, but I think essentially we do mainly the same thing.
I actually jotted that down as a question because I thought that's something that our listeners might be wondering too. Is there a difference between social worker, a psychologist? You also hear like therapist or counselor, all of those terms kind of used interchangeably. So are there marked differences between those titles, those roles?
Yeah, like so in Alberta, we're just trying to figure it out still, right? So there is the College of Psychologists and the College of Social Workers, right? And to call yourself a registered social worker or a registered psychologist, that's legislated, right? So that's a legal term. And then there's also now in Alberta, there's a College of Psychotherapists, and it's kind of a newer college, right? A newer organization that people who aren't psychologists or social workers, like clinical counselors or maybe some other professional, can belong to that college, right? But there is some differences with billing, right? So I don't know if someone who has a psychotherapist designation can bill with like Blue Cross or anything like that, but social workers and psychologists can, right? So I think that's important. When you're looking for a therapist and you have insurance coverage, you probably want to find a therapist who can bill that.
Okay. And so if you're saying, if someone says they're a social worker, or they say they're a psychologist, then that says that they're regulated by a governing body and that they have certain educational requirements, practice requirements, I'm guessing, guidelines and rules, stuff like that.
Yeah, ethical standards that they adhere to, right? Okay. So yeah, absolutely right.
I'm not sure if I really understand the difference between social worker and psychologist. Like in my messed up brain, I'm thinking a psychologist is more like, obviously this may not be right, but I feel like I would think that they would have more education than a social worker. And I don't, obviously now that you're talking, I'm like, oh, like, why am I thinking that? I don't understand why I would think that.
Well, yeah, and Kim, I think what you're touching on is injustice that social workers have felt for some time, right? So I think in Alberta, to be a psychologist, you need a master's degree in psychology, and then to be a member of that college. And I just think the nature of psychology is really kind of focusing on the individual, right? What's going on in terms of their biology, their cognition, their inner processes, and how that might interact with the world, right? And to be to be in the role of a therapist as a social worker, you also need a master's degree in social work. And I think the approach to therapy is just a little bit different. So like the initial philosophy is that yes, the person's internal experience, their thoughts and cognitions and feelings are all important, and they're also influenced by the world around them, right? And so social work takes more of that approach of someone inside of their environment and how there's kind of like this these systems at play that might impact someone's behavior or the way they look at the world. right? Psychology, and I'm being very general, and I'm sure some psychologists would argue with me, but psychology is more about what's going on with that person, right? Does that make sense?
Well, it's starting to make sense why social is in the name social worker. Like I didn't know what I was thinking before.
Well, I think like Mike, can't you be a social worker and not being a clinical social worker? So like not offering therapy. Like I think social work isn't social worker kind of a more broad term?
Yeah, that's right. And I think sometimes people just equate social worker with child welfare, or some kind of someone who fills out forms in a hospital or something like that. And yes, social workers do that, and they do a wonderful job, I'm sure. I am not that kind of social worker. So it's a broad term, and there's a lot of different kind of career paths within social work, and mine just happens to be in therapy.
Why isn't it called social therapy? Social therapist.
I don't know.
Yeah, Mike.
In terms of like my professional identity, like on paper, I'm a registered clinical social worker. I usually introduce myself as a therapist, just because it's easier to make sense.
Yeah, everyone knows what that means.
Yeah.
You might not know what clinical social worker means.
Right. But so let me say a little bit more. So a psychologist has to do what's called an EPPP. So this is a big test at the end of their education that allows them to be regulated and call themselves a psychologist. So social work is a little bit different. There is no exam at the end of your education. When you're completed, you can register as a social worker. There's a number of hours you have to have of like practice hours before you can do that. But then to have that clinical designation, there is a big exam. So there's really kind of almost the same kind of expectations for a master's level psychologist and a master's level clinical social worker.
Nice. So we've established your credentials.
And questioned you thoroughly on them.
Okay, we'll allow it. We'll allow it. As I was starting to say before, we have usually people know something to do with law and
deposition. By the way,
what's that?
Never mind. I thought I was making a clever legal joke, but
you might have, and I'm not that clever.
Oh, I said, is this a deposition? Like,
oh yeah, this is. You're doing well. Okay, so we often will be like, what do you wish all your clients knew before they came to see you, or what are the questions you get asked all the time? And so I put that to you, Mike. Like, what is some kind of information that you wish everybody knew before they even came to see you? If there's anything like that.
Yeah. I always ask folks if they've been to therapy before. And the reason I ask that question is I'm trying to figure out if their expectation of therapy matches what I can offer. Right. Just to get a sense of how they see it. Right. Because people come to therapy for all kinds of different reasons. Sorry, Evan, I kind of just lost my train of thought. Could you repeat that question just one more time?
Yeah, I'm asking, like, if you could just talk to the entire world right now, which we're not that broad of a reach, but if you could, and all your potential like new clients that are going to come and start seeing you, is there something that you wish that they all knew that you could now tell us?
Yeah. So let's say someone came into a couple came into therapy and they say, look, I don't need to be here, but my spouse is the one with the problem. So I'm here because they're here.
Yeah, makes sense.
And they may be quite insistent on that, right? The only reason we're here is because this person has a problem. And if they would just, snap out of things, then we would all be happy. And if they would just change, then we wouldn't be having these problems. And I think what I would want every person to know is that their own individual personal growth will improve their relationship, right? And so to to whatever thing they're trying to figure out in therapy, think of their contribution to it, and be willing to face that. Yeah, be willing to face that. And sometimes that's really hard. That could be really difficult. But I think it's so important, right? To realize that your side is just one perspective, and there's another person who is coming into therapy with you who has their own perspectives, their own thoughts, their own goals and dreams and hopes for their life, and to make space for all of that, right? And to not be so arrogant, I guess, to feel like whatever I think is going on is what's going on. Right? There's two or more perspectives, and all of those things need attention.
Everyone has a part to play.
You got it. Yeah.
Is there a common reason or sort of set of reasons why couples end up coming to see you?
Well, there's many reasons, but I think probably could boil it down to some themes, right? So the unique function of sex therapy, and just to kind of clarify a little bit, so ASECT is the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. It's a mouthful.
Okay.
And I am currently working towards certification through that body. And so I have a supervisor in Edmonton, Dr. Jason Jones, who is a ASECT certified sex therapy supervisor. Even more of a mouthful. So the unique thing about sex therapy is that it can look at the issues that might come up that are directly related to sex. They might actually be a sexual issue, right? And if you go to someone who doesn't specialize in sex, they may link it in as maybe a relational issue, right? Where if you would just talk to each other more, then you might have more sex or something like that. I mean, it may be true, but also there may be some things that make it more strictly kind of a sexual issue. So people come in to see me for sex therapy reasons specifically, right? Where it's about, how their body works, that sort of thing. And then how that might kind of play out relationally and emotionally, et cetera. But I think the more general couples therapy issues are, and this is maybe, you may have heard this before, people come to couples therapy to talk about money, kids, housework, and sex. So, and many other things, but that's kind of like the big four. As I think about this, we could be talking about money and disagreements with money, and Evan spends too much and, sabotages my savings attempts. And if we keep it about the content, we can only get so far. And I think often what we're bumping into is a different set of values. Right. So someone has had this relationship with money and they've learned to value it this way, and someone's learned to value it this way. And I think talking about the values and how someone sees these issues, what it means to them, et cetera, that's it's starting to be a more productive way to kind of resolve it, right? Because if it's just about you keep doing it wrong and my way's the right way, that doesn't go very far. So sorry, Heather, that was a long kind of answer to your question, but I see people a lot of people related to sexual health concerns, and then housework, kids, money, and then like relationship dynamics too, like trying to navigate power differences in relationships and that type of thing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
I'm surprised to hear that, because I thought you would just kind of focus on like the one topic, but it sounds like all of these other topics are just organically going to intersect with the issue they're coming in to see you for.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, let's say that someone, well, this has happened time and time again. Let's say someone comes in with some difficulty in the sexual realm. Maybe it's a difference in sexual desire, right? And a very kind of stereotypical epidemiology of that is, let's say this person was raised in a very maybe sexually conservative type of environment, and they've been told messages about sex. They've been told how to feel about sex, when and where someone can be sexual. And then they're married, and the expectation is just to now feel great about all that. And it's a huge adjustment, right? So you're right that whatever the presenting issue is, there may be a life story where like that presenting issue makes a lot of sense given where they are.
Fascinating.
So, oh, sorry, go ahead, Kim.
No, you go ahead. I was just going to get into all the emotions that come along with what he was talking about. Like people would have shame and anger and sadness and all these feelings. Like feeling the feels would probably be a really scary thing about like embarking on a journey to come visit you. And that's sort of what my mind was wandering towards.
Of just the process of getting into all that, Kim?
Like making the appointment and booking in, and like, what is that going to feel like? Like people must be really scared to make that phone call because they don't really know what you're going to be asking and what they're going to have to disclose. Right.
Yeah. And I feel like part of my role as a therapist is to come into a meeting really anticipating that this is hard for couples, right? It's hard to come and talk about feelings and to talk about their histories and to talk about the intimate details of their life. And part of my role is to really help them feel comfortable with that, right? So to create a space, create an environment where it's okay to feel those feelings. My hope is that when they come to my office and they feel the feelings, the message they get back from me is, of course, you're feeling these feelings. It makes perfect sense. It's perfectly normal. It's, the fact that you're feeling this is probably a good thing, means your emotions are working the way that they should. But we want it to be okay to have those emotional experiences. And they're welcomed and useful in therapy.
So how do people go from having problems to ending up in your office? Do you know anything about what that journey typically looks like?
That's a good question. I think there's three ways that couples get into conflict. And I'm not making this up. This comes from the work of Dr. Sue Johnson. She's a Canadian. She's responsible for emotion-focused couples therapy. Not to be confused with Sue Johansson, which is the late night sex talk with Sue Johansson.
Oh, that's who I was thinking of. That used to listen on the radio, right?
Right. Yeah.
How old am I? The radio.
I think Sue Johansson. I think I saw her on TV a couple times. People calling with these wild questions, and it was just kind of a novelty thing. But Sue Johnson, she is she helped develop emotion-focused couples therapy, and so she focuses a lot about what she calls the emotional dance that couples get into. Right, basically, like, what do we do when our insecurities are activated? And her research tells us that there's really three ways. So I like to think of this as a junior high dance, right? So the music's playing, right? The tacky lights are, shining on the floor. And so trying to create an atmosphere where people might ask each other to dance, right? And so on one hand, you have someone who's really, really keen and they're trying to pursue somebody, right? They're trying to pursue someone to dance. And it seems like the harder they chase, the more they pursue, the more their dance partner is trying to get out of there. It's really uncomfortable for this person, and they're trying to bolt, right? And so the faster they go, the stronger this person pursues. And then there's this kind of pursue. I don't know if it fits the dance analogy quite as much, but or maybe it's both. Yeah, both people are really trying to start something with the other person. Both people are trying to initiate something, maybe trying to lead in a way or bring up their points, and it's not going anywhere. It's just kind of like this butting heads.
They're both trying to dance their own dance, and they keep hitting knees and stuff and stepping on each other's toes, something like that.
Thank you, Evan.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Nice
It's
one.
a good analogy. Don't give up on it so easy.
Yeah.
I just needed to work it through. And then there's there's like the wallflowers, right? Where the music's playing, it's even a slow song. The lights are flashing. It'd be the perfect time to go and ask someone to dance, but and you even might know who you want to dance with, but both are kind of on opposite ends of the wall at the gym, right? No one wants to make the first move.
They want to, but they can't. But they just don't.
You know what? They want to so bad, and what would make them feel so wonderful is that if they didn't have to, and someone else would ask them to dance.
Mm.
And so those are the three dynamics that lead to conflict in couples, right? It's this kind of pursue withdraw, right? Where the harder I pursue information, emotions from you, the more uncomfortable you feel, and the more you want to move away from that. And then again, that pursue, where it's just like high conflict all the time. Both people want to be understood, and both are kind of one-upping all the time to be understood. And then there's the kind of avoidant couple, right? That says, look, I know we've got problems, but as long as we don't talk about it, we can get by, right? We can keep moving forward. Looks like there's nothing going on here. But over time, like those patterns over time, I think is what bring folks to my office.
And how does it work? Like, do you get people that come to you that are referred by a different psychologist or different therapist, or do they come to you directly? How does it usually work?
All the above. So I have I participate in a number of different kind of therapist communities, I guess. And so referrals come to me through those avenues. But then also I have a Psychology Today, which don't be confused because I'm not a psychologist, but it's just a directory of therapists. And people can look me up, look at my profile, and send me an email or give me a call and make an appointment that way. So it's just people reaching out to me, either referral from another professional or finding me on their own.
And then the big question I have, and Kim kind of touched on it, is like, what does it look like when they actually come to see you? Because I could definitely see Kim's point that it might be terrifying to kind of, schedule something with you and for a couple to invite a stranger into, the intimate part of their life. So what does it look like when they come in and sit down and meet with you? What do you do to kind of, how do you do that?
Yeah. So again, I think like that kind of humanistic approach, that philosophy to therapy is so important in creating this kind of safe space, right, for a couple, where they might not feel ready to disclose things, and that's okay, and they can disclose kind of as they feel ready. But I really take a lot of time to communicate to them that their goals are important to me, and the things that they're trying to get out of therapy are what I want to help them with, and that I'm joining them as an ally to their relationship, right? And I may have expertise in my own area, but they also have their own expertise in living their life. And I want to use their authority for what's going to be the best for them as much as possible, right? So it's not me kind of prescribing or telling them what I think they should do. The ideal version is us collaborating and understanding, how the position that they're in makes perfect sense, and trying to brainstorm ideas to kind of move out of those patterns and interactions that they get stuck in. Did that answer your question, Evan? I think the main idea is that I try to create a safe environment, and when they come and see me for a first appointment, and maybe a session or two after, I'm really kind of in assessment mode, right? So I go kind of back into their histories, and I ask about their early attachments and their childhood and trauma and any history with addictions, or talk about health or mental health, and talk about their model of self and what they've learned about who they are based on their past experiences. And we just try to build a big foundation for starting in on the couples work. And that foundation is really understanding and accepting and appreciating who the person is that's in my office.
Yes, that does answer the question. Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Is there like a mood you set? I'm picturing like dim lights, like candles, the pan flute maybe playing softly to create like an environment where people feel comfortable. I don't know. Maybe I've seen this on TV or something. Is there like a mood you set for this meeting? Yeah,
you've got it, Kim. No, I have this. I'm going to tell you, this is the office that I'm. Right, it's just an office. I think my lunch bag's on the couch. Ignore that. But right, just an office. Hopefully, it's comfortable.
Looks cozy, comfortable. Yeah.
I have this kind of fantasy of having, an office with a real fireplace one day, and maybe a big dog laying by the fire. But that's a fantasy, and so until then, I just have a regular office. But yeah, like I think what makes people comfortable is when they feel accepted and heard and understood. Right? Kind of like, I don't know. Do any of you have that like favorite aunt or uncle or relative or something that you just know that whatever you do or whatever you say, they think you're all right?
Yeah.
And, they love you for who you are and just assume the best from you. Right. I think like that type of vibe, right, is what I hope clients feel, that they're a normal, acceptable human being, and that wherever they are, we can make sense of it and understand it. So I think that's where that comfort comes from. It's less about the chairs in my office or the dim lighting of the pan flute, and more about I think how they're welcomed.
So no incense?
No.
There could be, and I'm sure there's some therapists out there who incorporate that. I can't organize myself to get incense.
Yeah.
I noted something you said earlier. You said that you're an ally to the relationship. So, sometimes, Evan and I see couples, and Kim does as well, sort of on the back end of a relationship where they've decided to end things. But sometimes what I hear as feedback from counseling is one person felt like, oh, they were on their side. I went and I just got lectured to, or they didn't go and tell my husband what to do at all, right? That there's this kind of idea that you're going to figure out who's doing the wrong thing in the relationship. I've heard loud and clear that's not what you do, but I guess I'm sort of curious about how you provide feedback to the couple or things that they can work on, or if that's something that you even do. Is that a question? I feel like I kind of rambled on there.
I'll ramble a bit now.
Well, let me take a stab at it first, Mike, because I feel like I've had firsthand experience. I'm not a client of Mike's, but sometimes Mike tests out techniques on me. and or maybe not tests, just uses them for his own pleasure, and also for the betterment of our relationship. And usually what I've experienced him doing, and I don't know how much he does this actually in this, I'll let him speak to it in a second, is he likes to get people talking about it, about how they feel about it and how that makes them feel. So, a good example might be, Esther, my wife, will say something to Mike, and his wife, will, we're visiting or something, about something annoying I've done or something. And then Mike will say, and how does that make you feel? And then she'll start talking about that, and you'll just keep digging down. And before you know it, she's lying down on the couch, the incense is out, and we've gotten somewhere meaningful. Does that, I mean, now it's your turn to actually tell us how it actually goes, Mike.
Yeah. So I think there's a time and place for everything. And sometimes I can be very directive with clients, right? And, say, look, this is what's going on, right? But I have to be very careful with that, right? Because if I don't have, if I'm not aligned with the couple, they're not going to ever come back again, right? Because someone's going to be mad. Or I mean, if I call out a husband for something, sometimes it's the partner that gets upset, and they want to defend their partner, right? And so to be that directive, I think you've got to be very judicial with that. But like Evan was saying, right? So let's say you come to a couples therapist, and you're talking about, I don't know, what would be housework, let's say, right? And it feels unequal with you and your partner, and you're talking about not just the laundry, but the meaning of the laundry, what the laundry kind of represents and symbolizes for you, and the emotions that kind of come from that meaning. And if we assume that you're a good person who's not trying to sabotage or deceive anybody, and your partner's the same, and your partner witnesses me hearing your concerns about laundry, validating your concerns, kind of bringing those concerns to a core emotional place where you're expressing really authentic, tender feelings. My assumption here is that your partner is also being impacted by that, and change is happening without me having to call anybody out on anything. So just, I think just the process of sharing feelings and emotions and dreams and values with each other, we gain a greater respect for each other, and we want to change when we know those parts of each other. I think sometimes what we do to protect those really soft parts is we kind of we mask them with anger or being annoyed or something like that, and those feelings, they don't communicate quite as clearly. And so when we don't share those core emotions, I think that's where we get in trouble, right? That it's actually harder for our partners to pick up the meaning and to pick up the significance for us.
Does that come down to the definition of a healthy relationship, like good communication? Is that kind of the key to it all? Or like, how do you guys define a healthy relationship?
Yeah, I think this is a changing definition for me. Maybe early in my career, I would have had some like universal maxims of what makes a healthy relationship. But I'm not so hard-lined anymore. I think what makes a healthy relationship is, so I'll explain this, but I think that a healthy relationship is an intimate relationship. And if we define intimacy as the willingness to be known, the willingness to know someone else, and embracing the discomfort that comes with being known, or finding out who your partner really is when you thought they were different, and then making space for each other and each other's differences through communication, through collaboration. That's, to me, that's what makes a healthy relationship.
Mm.
I was kind of wondering if you were going to toss in like, like a number, like how often like couples need to get busy or something like that.
Yeah.
Let's get down to brass tacks here, Mike. How often should people be having sex? What are the secrets to the best sex? Just tell us.
Yeah. So these are common questions. So frequency of sex. So there's a range in the average. Like, so first off, when there's a average range, you know that it's not a clear answer, right? So there's a range of what's considered healthy, normal sexual encounters, and that's like, maybe several times a month to once every 6 months or something. I'm not representing it super accurately, but there's a big range, right? And so frequency, I think, is less important than what that encounter means to the couple, right? So some couples might be totally fine to have sex every once in a while, because it doesn't. The significance of it kind of allows that, right? And other couples, it might be good for them to have sex more often, because of what it means to them, right? And so to me, the meaning is what's really important. And if it's just about the numbers, then that almost sounds like role based versus intimacy based, right? So as long as I'm meeting the quota, we're good. But then no one talks about what kind of sex should we be having. What are your fantasies? What are your kind of hopes and dreams and expectations sexually? What do you want to experience sexually? Those conversations, we don't have to have it if it's just about numbers, right? So does that answer that question? Am I making sense?
Yeah, I think like little girls back in like the 90s were getting Teen Magazine, and it would pop up all the time as like an important topic. And I think a lot of people out there have a skewed understanding about what is healthy for a couple and what's important, because everybody's comparing themselves with other people. Like we all know that there's couples who get divorced and you think, wow, I thought they had a really good relationship. This is surprising to me. Or couples who you think maybe aren't doing so well because they're very vocal with each other and maybe get angry at each other in public. You think maybe they don't have a good relationship, but maybe they're phenomenal. So I think a lot of stuff you're talking about is really interesting to me anyway.
Yeah. And yeah, I think it's interesting too. And kind of, you reminded me of the second half of Evan's question, which was like, what makes a healthy sexual relationship? And there's another Canadian sex therapist, Peggy Kleinplatz. She's out of the University of Ottawa, and she has focused her career on optimal sexuality, right? Optimal sexual experiences, she talks a lot about who is having the greatest sex, right? There's a bit of a belief that young people must be having just like wild, wonderful sex. And her research, what age range what do you three think? Like, who's having the greatest sex? Teenagers or the elderly people?
Elderly, if I had to pick one of the two categories.
Yeah, you're right. People who are over 60, right, are reporting the most sexual satisfaction. And when you're
over 60, so we haven't even experienced it yet.
Yeah, that's right. We've got a lot to look forward to. Think about it when you're a young kid and you have a sexual experience, you're probably just grateful to have had that sexual experience, right? You're like, what? Like, that was awesome. Just the fact that someone was willing to interact with my body in that way. And then when you kind of age and mature, you can start kind of bringing your heart into it as well, right? And talking about, again, meaning and Yeah. So anyway, so Peggy would say, right, that, Cosmo magazine will say, these are the 25 best techniques for oral sex. And
Right.
as long as you're doing this, you'll be great in bed, and there'll be people lined up to have sex with you. Right. And I remember being in a training where Peggy said, she's like, yes, it is important to know how to touch people's bodies. But more important, it's important to know how to touch their hearts as well, and to touch their hearts through a sexual experience. That's what is meaningful. And that's what creates this optimal sexual experience. Not just knowing the right move, right? But what would be important, what's connecting to another person, and being willing to have those conversations.
We're all nodding our heads. The listener can't hear us nodding our heads, but we all are. Okay, so you said that you got this sort of shifting or evolving definition of a healthy relationship. Is there anything that is a signifier of an unhealthy relationship? Are there any warning signs that, you might tell folks, oh, if this is happening, this might be a hint that you want to seek some help in your relationship?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's why, I thank you, because it gets me thinking. I think it starts with a relationship with ourselves, right? And do we have a healthy or unhealthy relationship with ourselves, right? And to me, what I go to is, are we comfortable with our own emotional processes? Do we trust what our emotions are telling us? Or are we ashamed of them? Do we try to keep them away? Do we think that we're at our core? Like, if someone really knew us or knew me, would they reject me, right? Or am I acceptable? If I really showed up for other people, would they appreciate who I am and accept me? And so I think that it starts with our relationship with ourselves, right? Our model of who we are in relation to other people. Because what happens is we take that model of self and we bring it into a relationship, and then we conduct ourselves according to that model. Right. So if at my core, I think I'm a horrible person, let's say, does that belief impact how I show up in the relationship? If I think I'm horrible at my core, what would change for me in my relationship? Right. And I might not do things if I think everything I touch is destroyed or something like that. I might kind of be cautious about how I really jump into the relationship. And so having learning to have a lot of self-love and compassion and awareness, so we can do our own work to be the best version of ourselves that we can be. I think that's really important. And that's really, I think, a necessary step for relational health. Because when we don't have that kind of steadiness with who we are, then we start kind of roping our partner in to give us things that they really can't, right? And so I think an unhealthy relationship is a relationship where we have maybe unspoken and unrealistic expectations of each other. And then when those expectations are not met, there's a range of things that can happen. But we might feel very maybe contemptuous towards another person, or critical towards them, and sometimes the tough things we see in a relationship are someone really trying to navigate their own stuff, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it does. I just thought of a time that I had a dream where my husband had done something like really betraying, and I woke up and I was angry at him, and I really felt anger. I mean, I didn't express it at him, but I really felt angry at him when I woke up in the morning. And it just made me realize like how much of there's this internal stuff that goes on in your head because he didn't know about anything that was there. And like, but there was some really real feelings, right? Which is quickly dissipated when I realized that none of that was all going on in my head. But it strikes me that that's the kind of thing that can happen with in so many relationships. Maybe is there just is more and more stuff going on in people's heads that isn't coming out or being expressed. Maybe
totally. And you made me think of, there's this psychology phenomenon called the fundamental attribution error, right? And I think that the meaning is in the name, an attribution error, right? So it sounds like there was something going on internally for you, Heather, where you had this dream and you felt angry.
Oh no, I just realized I told a therapist about a dream I had. What was I thinking?
All right.
Too late now. That genie's out of the bottle, Heather.
Well, no, I think I just how normal this is, right? And then you wake up and your husband's sitting or laying right there.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to direct that anger, like, how could you do this to me?
Yeah.
Right? When what you're identifying, right, is that there's something going on inside of you, and it was a dream and separate from real life, I suppose. But those emotions are just so powerful, right? And it's so easy to say, Evan, how could you make me feel this way?
Yeah. Well, and I saw a reel today that was shared with me by my sister-in-law about this. It's like this guy doing all the chores around the house, and is like all these things about how he cheated on his wife, and so he was doing all these chores, but then it turned out that it was in her dream that he cheated on her. And so, I mean, it's super common. That example, Heather, that you shared, like I've lived on the other side of that many mornings. It's happened a few times. I'm like, it didn't really happen. I'm sorry. Yeah. So it's kind of humorous, but I guess that's an example of, that can happen outside of dreams too.
Uh-huh.
And when that does happen, right, when we talk about a healthy move, right, is to recognize and validate, to make room for someone's emotional experience. Like, if we're betrayed by a partner or we're hurt by a partner, of course, that's going to make us feel upset and angry, right? And we can learn to validate that in our partners, and they can provide the same for us. Normalizing our human emotions, right?
Uh-huh.
Are there certain couples out there that maybe would find their way to therapy more if they didn't communicate so effectively together? Like, I guess I'm trying to unpack, like, there's people who can solve these problems as a couple on their own. And then there's people who need to go to therapy to sort of find that solution or just talk through the problem. What skill set is important for couples to have to be able to work through maybe these issues, or at least try a little bit on their own before it kind of moves to therapy?
Great question. I think the first skill is to develop some self-awareness, right? And that's really what we were just talking about, right? That when my spouse does something and it activates something in me, that may have nothing to do with my partner and everything to do with my history, or maybe I've learned throughout my experience that when this happens, it means something dangerous for me, and then maybe I go into battle mode or something, right? So that self-awareness is really important, right? That just being able to communicate, right? Like when you invited me to this podcast, I felt happy, and right, just being able to say, like, connect A plus B, right? When this happened, I felt this way. When you didn't look at me when I came home from work, I felt like you were ignoring me, and I felt ignored so much as a child, and so it was really hard, right? And being able to make those connections within yourself, right, instead of holding your partner accountable for how you feel. And so then the next really important step is to be able to listen. And sometimes, when we have problems or we hear our partner's problems, it's uncomfortable, hear that they're upset. And so we might want to jump in and solve something. Or maybe we get defensive and, like kind of the classic example that I share is one time, relationships have ups and downs and disconnections and connections. And one time I just communicated to my wife, I said, hey, I've been feeling a little bit disconnected. And she said, well, how's that supposed to make me feel? Can't you, like, don't you know how hard I've been trying to help us feel connected? Right. And so that's kind of it became about that, right? Because if we can talk about how hard she's been trying, then we don't have to talk about how I might be feeling disconnected, right? And does that make sense? She'd be okay with me sharing that. Learning. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in that example, I think what you're saying is like, you didn't intend to make her feel any way at all. You were sharing what you were feeling.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? And me sharing that had all kinds of meaning for her, right? That she had to kind of sort through. And so to really listen, we would listen to understand, right, what someone's experience is. And it's hard work, right? That when a spouse says, look, I'm feeling alone in our relationship, or I'm feeling disconnected, to kind of manage your own experience with that information and just really hear what that person's saying. I think self-awareness and being able to listen are fundamental skills in relationships. You heard it here first, Devin.
We got a lot of truth bombs here. We got the
That's
secret.
so hard, though. Isn't there an easier way?
Yeah, come on, Mike.
Well, I think the easiest way is to work through it in the early years of a relationship, and that's when I get really directive. Actually, with couples, I might ask, like you asked, what she was thinking, and do you really want to know? Right? Because she wants to tell you, but every time she tells you, you keep cutting her off. Like, do you want to know or not? Right? So I sometimes have to put people in place. But it is hard. It is really hard.
It sort of makes me feel like there's a huge benefit for people doing therapy. Like, not everything needs to be solved on your own, and you can learn some of these skills or these ideas from going to visit a professional. Like, one of my favorite people's had a lot of therapy, and we've learned so much from that experience that it's helped out solve problems down the road that maybe, could have been big problems, but they just didn't, escalate. So, like, I'm sort of going down the path of, like, there is a stigma around going to therapy and maybe people finding out that you're not able to solve something on your own. But it seems to me the benefits are absolutely massive for getting a base level of knowledge, and you've learned that from a professional.
Yeah, right. So someone who has really looked into relationship dynamics and what makes a relationship work and what doesn't. And I was thinking, like, the huge benefit for me. Look, I'm not immune to relationship issues, and the reasons that people come to my office, those are things that likely are present in my relationships or your relationships, right? I'm so grateful that this is the area of study for me, right? Because I get to think about relationship health all the time, and I've had to kind of work through my own stuff, right? And that's normal. But I'm just lucky enough to be able to focus on this and listen to podcasts and read books every day about this. So it's a privileged position. And yeah, right. Like, I think that there's benefit for anyone who wants to just kind of, like you said, Kim, create that baseline for this is how we can operate together.
Yeah, Kim, that's a really interesting point, because I think even what I've been assuming is that folks are ending up in Michael's office, or should only be ending up in Michael's office, if they're at a crisis or something has gone wrong, right? Something's going terribly. But it sounds to me like, well, I mean, I believe in therapy. I think it's a wonderful tool. And that on that journey of self-improvement, there's no reason why any couple wouldn't benefit from visiting Michael or someone like him to improve their relationship, even if it's not bad or doesn't have problems. I'm using quotes around all these negative words as I'm saying them.
Yeah, I love it when I have couples that come to my office who are in love with each other, right, and who want to strengthen their relationship. And I think it's a little bit easier to work through these things when there's this feeling of fondness and connection to each other.
Yeah, see more Mike, and then you might not ever have to be Heather's or my clients unless you need a will or something.
Yeah.
But we talk a lot about divorce in this podcast and all the legal issues and stuff surrounding that, and we've had psychologists come on and talk about that and what that means for children and how they help people through that. And it's on topic that way, in that if people were more likely to come see you when they're starting to see some issues in their relationship, then maybe they can avoid the very costly road of divorce.
Yeah, maybe. And let me just add that when I think of success in couples therapy, this is another definition that's changing for me. I used to think, right, if I could just help couples see all the beautiful reasons they should stay together, then that's success. But I don't see it that way anymore. I think success in couples therapy is the ability to be honest with yourself and with the other person, and to accept who the other person is. And sometimes that might mean that maybe someone's kind of moving out of their relationship. Maybe a couple wants different things, and I think you can do that in a very connecting, honest way. It doesn't have to be you don't have to be out for blood.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that definition. That does seem to get at the heart of it, at the root of it, rather than making sure things are patched up so you can live back happily ever after.
Yeah.
It's often struck me that couples who are continuing to parent with one another for whatever reason, have a continuing relationship after separation or divorce, think that through separating, they will escape the communication issues and some of the things that they had when they were together. But in fact, some of those things become even more challenging after a separation or divorce. So I would think that couples counseling can help that, even if, like you said, Michael, it doesn't result in the success of keeping the couple together, but that maybe some of those things can, those skills can help then as they transition from a married couple to an unmarried couple, or whatever their relationship has in store for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I often say even after you're separated or divorced, you're still going to be a family, but it's just organized differently.
Uh-huh.
Right? And so, just like you said, you still have to have a relationship with each other.
Yeah.
I had an obscure thought. So we've been approaching this as like a couples thing, but there are so many people in this world who are not in a couple. They're single, maybe have been single for a long period of time, or maybe they're just single a lot. So do people, those people maybe want to come see somebody like you, but maybe they're thinking that they need to be a couple to come see somebody like you. What is the scenario? Is there a scenario where a single person would come see you and say, I'm striking out a lot, things aren't working out, or I'm alone all the time and I fear getting into a relationship because I've been alone so much in my life? What does that look like?
Yeah, certainly I see a lot of individuals as well. And sometimes the conversation, it could be about just that, right? Why is it that I have these repeated patterns in relationships? And so self-discovery is a really important part of that, right? And yeah, maybe it's learning to do things different. Maybe it's learning to be okay with yourself and accept yourself and show up authentically in relationships versus more of a protected version of that, right? So yeah, certainly there's lots of value in coming to see a relationship therapist as an individual as well. I think like we just can't get out of relationships. We're human beings, right? It's what we want to do. It's what we naturally do. And when we're not in relationship with people, we do feel a void. We feel lonely, and we want to belong to others.
Nice. Well, we've covered some good ground. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you've been really hoping we would ask you, or anything that you want to share that you haven't shared yet, Mike?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just cool that I've been invited to speak with the three of you, and kind of, I like the idea of demystifying the legal system and making it accessible. And yeah, I think it's hard for anybody, lots of people, to navigate through all that. And I just think it's great what you're doing, trying to make it a little easier for folks. So
thanks so much. And I hope we've been able to demystify a little bit sex therapy and make it more accessible to people. Maybe. Yeah, I hope so. Heather, do you have any closing thoughts or any last questions on your mind?
No, I don't. It's just been a real pleasure chatting with you, Michael. And thank you so much for sharing your time and knowledge with us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Of course. Nice to be here.
Kim, last chance.
Same as Heather. I was like kind of wasn't sure what the conversation, how it was going to evolve today, because I'm kind of immature about some topics. And I just thought this was a really comfortable, space today. And I think there's a lot of really interesting things people are going to want to hear from you.
Okay.
Send them my way. Happy to.
We didn't even talk about toys or anything.
Oh yeah. That's another podcast.
Thanks for coming on, Mike. I really appreciate it. And it's been great. I hope that, we've accomplished that goal of, getting the message out there of what you offer, and that, you're a nice guy. You're a nice guy to talk to, easy to talk to. Even about difficult things.
Yeah, I think again, the one thing that I would just want to normalize is that to have issues in a relationship is the most normal human experience. And when we feel distress in our intimate relationships, it's really scary, right? It can be really painful. And I think it can be really great to talk to someone who helps you feel like, oh yeah, this is normal what I'm going through. A lot of people go through this. I'm not the only one, right? Because there's not always avenues to discuss that.
Nice. Well said. On that note, this has been another episode of Access to Justice. Thank you for listening or watching. If you have any questions you'd like us to address on the podcast, send an email to accesstojustisepodcast@gmail.com. That's access number 2 and then justicepodcast@gmail.com. And we'll do our best to get you an answer on an upcoming episode. Thanks, everyone.
Any information in this video is general information only and is not, nor is it intended to be, legal advice. Watching this video does not create a lawyer-client relationship. You should always seek the advice of a lawyer or other qualified professional for advice regarding your individual situation. While we take care to ensure that the information contained in this video is accurate and up to date, we make no warranties or representations as to the suitability, completeness, or accuracy of the information contained in this video. Any reliance you place on the information is at your own risk. Kahane Law Office, Merrick Law, Heather Malarick Professional Corporation, Evan Clark Professional Corporation, Evan Clark, Heather Malarick, and any guests will not be responsible nor liable in any way for any content, including but not limited to any errors or omissions in the content, or for any loss or damage of any kind incurred as a result of any content communicated in this video, whether by Evan Clark, Heather Malarick, or by a third party. Kim McDonald is a financial advisor with Raymond James Limited. Information provided is not a solicitation, and although obtained from sources considered reliable, is not guaranteed. The view and opinions contained in this media are those of Kim McDonald, not Raymond James Limited. Securities-related products and services are offered through Raymond James Limited, member Canadian Investor Protection Fund. Insurance products and services are offered through Raymond James Financial Planning Limited, which is not a member Canadian Investor Protection Fund. Raymond James advisors are not tax advisors, and we recommend that clients seek independent advice from a professional advisor on tax-related matters. Insurance products and services are offered through Raymond James Financial Planning Limited, RJFP, a subsidiary of Raymond James Limited, which is not a member Canadian Investor Protection Fund. When providing life insurance products, financial advisors are acting as insurance representatives of RJFP.
Darkness of the dales dissipates, declines, because of he who turned water